Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this talk. It's already 10 in Jakarta now. So good morning for all participants. I'm Ricky. I'm a General Secretary of FOSI. So thank you very much for sparing your time in this good Saturday morning. So we are glad to inform you that we have established our YouTube platform for FOSI channel, so you can enjoy our FOSI talk video in YouTube channel, including this talk also. So I will record this talk, and then later I will upload this to YouTube channel. So we also thanks to Noble Resource and Geoscience Delta Andalans for funding this platform, so we can continue this talk. And then now let me introduce our speaker, Pak Erlangga Septama. He is one of the FOSI committee, now currently working in Pertamina Upstream Research Technology, and he is one of the experts of sedimentology and stratigraphy, frequently invited speaker about sedimentology, stratigraphy, and sequence stratigraphy, especially in Mahakam Delta. So we are very honored to have Pak Erlangga in this talk. Before we continue the talk, let me give some rules. So basically, I will recommend you to mute all the audio and video to maintain the connections, so we can have a good connections. And if you want to have questions, later I will open the question session at the end of the talk. So Pak Erlangga will start, and then after the talk, we will have a question session at the end. And if you want to have a questions, please type your name in the chat box. You can see the chat box below at the center of your screens. I think we can continue this talk, and Pak Erlangga, without any further ado, the time is yours. You can begin your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ricky, for the time. Gonna start the video.
Yeah, we can
see. Okay, everybody can hear my voice?
Yeah, we can hear your voice and your video. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so good morning and happy weekend, everyone. So I'm sorry to spoil your weekend with a little bit stable isotope stuff. So this is probably the last thing people want to hear in this beautiful Saturday morning, actually. So I'm really surprised with the number of attendance today, and hopefully everybody will having fun with this. And my suggestion is, please don't take it really seriously, just having fun. So my talk will discuss about the utilization of the improved multi-proxy approach from the paleoclimate to high-resolution stratigraphy tools. Okay, this is a brief info about myself. So I spent most of my career in Pertamina as a geoscientist, actually. And currently I'm working with the Pertamina Research and Technology Center. And today, proudly, our VP, Ari Samudro, is present with us. I just will give a bit info about the Pertamina RTC. So we usually held a research ideation in every end of the years. So we definitely want to take this opportunity and hoping that my presentation probably will provoke some fresh or even wild idea from academia, especially in upstream sector. And then they can submit some of the research idea in the end of the years. Okay, anybody of you ever heard about the word of proxy? So I think the word of proxy is probably not very popular in geoscience, but according to the dictionary, the meaning is something that can be used to represent some value. More specifically in geoscience, it could be defined as preserved physical or chemical or biological characters that stand for direct measurement and represent specific environmental condition. So I'm gonna give you a bit satire cartoon about the so-called proxy wars. Here we saw two gentlemen, likely president and prime minister from some country, who are fighting and punching. But instead of punching each other, they prefer to indirectly evoke pain to the third person to hurt each other. So in this case, the third person are the proxy to trade the pain between these two power companions. If you see that I'm adding improve in my presentation title, so the word improve means the use of correction, compensator, or supplemental data. So after the correction, it is expected that the data not really dependent to the specific environmental condition and could be used globally to aid stratigraphy analysis. The aims of this study is actually simply to have more detailed, accurate, formalized, and a robust correlation. And the objective are, as we will use it for the stratigraphy or in the future probably in sequence strat analysis, it is expected to be able to detect the eusticity signal. It could be used in a global correlation. We also want to assess whether or not this is feasible to commercialize the method to be used in industry. And lastly, but not least, what I had thought before, that to provoke some research idea in the high-res stratigraphy. This big project is actually a part of my doctoral research in Canada on the Margin National Science Foundation focus area. So National Science Foundation is a research institution in the United States. It's maybe comparable with LIPI in Indonesia. The focus area ranging from between Canadian Arctic, maybe we'll use my pointer, the Canadian Arctic, California borderland, Pyrenees, Spain, Gulf of Papua, and Aegean Sea in Turkey. But in my presentation, as the time permitted, I will just talk in some of the focus areas, such as in California borderland, Pyrenees, and Gulf of Papua. Okay, this presentation is heavily reliant to some research article that has been produced by the research collaborator around the world. Some are done by myself as the principal author, such as in Septama et al. In 2016 and Septama and Bentley 2017 in the Bulletin of American Association of Petroleum Geoscience. And this is a brief presentation overview. So we have just done some of the background and objective section. Then we will review some methodologies such as oxygen isotope and carbon isotope, all with the case study. And this presentation will sum up with some conclusion. Actually, there are tens of hundreds of proxies outside there to be used for geological research. But time-wise, as we had only a very few hours, and as I don't want to spoil the entire weekend, I will just discuss these two major proxies, including the improvement and examples. So we could bring into attention the other proxies in another opportunity. So don't be upset. So before I start with this slide, I want, or could some of you to voluntarily answer this question in the chat box. Maybe I give 10 or 20 seconds time. Yes, please fill it the chat box with this the answer of this question. What is the most notable factor that contribute for the high sea level fluctuation over a rapid or short period? Is it A, evaporation and precipitation, B, tectonoeostasy, C, hydroeostasy? Okay, see most people answering B, the tectonoeostasy. And I think it's right, but let me next first. Okay, yes, actually tectonoeostasy is right, but the most proper thing, the most proper answer is actually the glacioeostasy, because according to some research, the highest sea level fluctuation over a short period is caused by glacioeostasy. We can see here the rate of like 10 meters per 1,000 years with a really short duration of around 10,000 to 100,000 years with a really high amplitude of 120 to 150 meters. The tectonic give the highest fluctuation actually. We can see some highest fluctuation is gave by the tectonoeostasy, but it is over the long period of time. So if we want to seek a millennial or centennial scale of change, or in this case, a high-res stratigraphy variation, we need to deal with the glacial and the glacial history in our globes. Okay, now we move to our first proxy, which is oxygen stable isotope. But firstly, the word stable here doesn't mean that there is an unstable isotope exists or ever exists as a counterpart, but rather we call it as the radioactive or a radioisotope. So in this word, there is two types of isotope. One is a stable isotope and the other one is a radioisotope. The difference is the stable isotope is never decay into a half-life, such as a radioisotope. And actually in oxygen isotopes, they have three kind of oxygen isotopes, but because the But because the 17 oxygen is a very small number, it's only 0.04%, so it could be negligible. So we will just use the two oxygen isotopes, which are oxygen 16 and oxygen 18. So here the oxygen 16 is 99.76% abundance, and the oxygen 18 have a quite small number, 0.20% of abundance. The other parameters is the oxygen 16 are light, whereas the oxygen 18 is rare and heavy. So in the case of the glacial or glaciation periods, or where the ice form, the evaporation process are dominant, and the lightest isotope, which is 16 or oxygen 16, will easily evaporate and remove from the ocean. And it will be held at the ice inland and polar area. While in the other hand, oxygen 18 will remain at the seawater. So this is mean that we will have the positive oxygen 18 because of the apparent enrichment of oxygen 18 in seawater in the glaciation periods. In contrary, during the glaciation, where the ice melting, the oxygen 16 that was held at the ice cap, because the ice is melting, it will be reintroduced to the seawater, and apparently it will decrease the ratio of the oxygen 18 over the oxygen 16. And this is mean the negative excursion. So this oxygen isotope composition will be preserved in the shell of marine organisms such as benthic and planktic flora, or any other element in the seawater, as long as they contain oxygen. So it is really easy to get the oxygen stable isotope actually, because it could be also contained in the nanoplankton, or maybe diatoms, maybe also radiolaria, or even in the seawater itself. We're gonna see the curve soon. Okay, so this is the oxygen isotope excursion curve with the oxygen 18 to 16 ratio. So we knew that there is two oxygen isotope, oxygen 18 and oxygen 16. Then we use the excursion curve using the ratio between the oxygen 18 and oxygen 16. So the coolest way to pronounce the proxy is delta O18. So from now on, I will just pronounce it as the delta O18. If we see the unit, the negative excursion are going up to the peak, and positive excursion are going down. Anybody can see my arrow here? Okay. If we see there is another definition here, PPBD, or Vienna PD belemnitis. So because the analysis of the stable isotope mostly using the mass spectrometry, the usual unit is in part per thousand or part per mil of VPDB. So what kind of the definition is it? Because it's quite a strange name. VPDB is stand for Vienna PD belemnitis. Actually, this is the original and initial shell material that been used in the past for the mass spectrometry instrument calibration. So as we knew, some of you maybe know that the belemnitis is kind of animals. It's a cephalopod, which are already extinct. Because it is found in the PD River in South Carolina in US, and in the first time it is analyzed in Vienna, so that the where the name came from, PPBD, sorry. The rules of thumb from the delta O18 are in every decrease or increase of 1 per mil is equal to the fluctuation of 100 meters sea levels. while the temperature effect is around 1 degree centigrade for each 0.25 per mil delta O18 variation. So the oxygen isotope is very dependent to the temperature. To make sure that the measurement is variant independent from the latitude effect, in example, the measurement in tropical Papua New Guinea should be fairly equal to the measurement in the example subtropical Canada or in California. And the discrepancies of the delta O18 is solely reflects a variation of the glaciation and deglaciation period. We could use some of the environmental corrections such as strontium and magnesium over a calcium ratio. Strontium is present in aragonite and show inverse correlation with seawater. So the higher the strontium to calcium ratio, the lower temperature and vice versa. Meanwhile, the magnesium was constructed by the organism internally. So the organism produce the magnesium themselves by the what is called as the endothermic process. The organism will incorporate more magnesium into their shell in warm water and vice versa. This both correction could be used to compensate the temperature effect. So the measurement anywhere around the globe, either in equator or in subtropic or even in Arctic, will be of temperature independent. And this is just the example of the sea level estimation derived from the delta O18 excursion curve. As we can see, the curve excursion is relates or respond to the global sea level elasticity. So maybe some of you or some people may be asked, how reliable is the data? So far, the delta O18 are one of the most reliable proxy we could find in the academic world. And actually it never used in the industrial yet. The measurement is always taken on monospecific specimen. So if we want to do a measurement, we should pick a monospecific, maybe like a planktic forams, such as maybe Globigerinoides or Globigerina, and make it in one packet of the samples. There have been tens or hundreds curve stacks. So this picture here is actually the curve stacks around the world. So it looks like seismic wave data. To get the optimum averaging factor, the researcher also performed a data stacking in the delta O18 data. And there is also a basin correction depend on the position of the data acquisition. So in example, if we acquire a data in Papua New Guinea, we will use the data or the reservoir basin in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Or maybe if we want to take samples in the Caribbean, there is a specific reservoir or specific basin that could be used as a calibration factor. And as we see earlier, we also have the paleo temperature correction. So now we enter the case study in two of NSF or National Science Foundation focus area, which are in the California borderland, and the other one is in the Gulf of Papua. In California borderland, we will use delta O18 as a reference. So there is no direct measurement in delta O18. Incorporate with seismic and core data, and also improve or support by the beryllium-10 radioactive isotope. And in Gulf of Papua, we will use delta oxygen 18 direct measurement, support by the provenance data of the sand, turbidite sand, and clay samples. The California borderland is a techtonically active margin as a result from the collision between North America and Juan de Fuca plate. It characterized by the relative narrow shelf and complex basin and rich bathymetry. The development of the basin began in the Miocene when the Great Valley Forearc Basin subduction had cheese and the transform tectonism, which is a very famous San Andreas Fault zone, dominated the region. So I guess this line is the San Andreas Fault zone. The basin and ridge geometry opening was created due to the transform tectonism during the late Miocene. So as we see here as the big trapezoidal shape in map, or maybe for some of us, it probably seems more like a giant ketupat. Okay, this is the zoom view of the basin. And our focus area will be nearby the continental margin, where some streams are collected downslope and construct a deep sea fan complex. This next slide is the detailed bathymetry map of the study area. So the land is in the west. Oh, the land is here. Oh, sorry. I think, yeah, I got wrong. The land should be in the east. The land is in the east and the ocean in the west. Some of the notable physiography features are Gulf of Santa Catalina. So GOSG stands for Gulf of Santa Catalina. And to the western part, going down deep to the San Diego Trough, which is more than 1,500 meters deep. And we could also see some of the deep ridge features, such as so M here is stand for San Mateo Ridge. O is Oceanside Karlsbad. Oh, sorry, Oceanside. Yeah, Oceanside Ridge. C is stand for Karlsbad Ridge. And one in the southernmost is the G is the La Jolla Ridge. We will talk later about the three of them. So we will focus on the O, Oceanside, C, Karlsbad, and G, La Jolla Ridge. Okay, now we see the seismic section on the base of slope in San Diego Trough. So as I told before, this study does not acquire a new oxygen isotope data, but rather they only use the existing data actually that have been gathered previously. So the H model is using the Keppel and Lambeck excursion curve 2001 with around 50,000 years of range. So the x-axis here is actually H, 0 to 50, HKA is mean 50,000 years. Or it is translated into the specific terminology, oxygen isotope stage. So we have oxygen isotope stage 1, 2, and 3, where the 3 is the oldest one and 1 is the youngest one. the absolute age from the core are defined by the sample dating in the base of channel, which is represent, so there is some base, channel base here. It will be represent the fan system initiation, and the other samples will acquire in the hemipelagic layers that overlay the system, as assume that this is the end of the fan system depositional period or a shoot down phase. So we can see the table below in this dating age are correlated to the established delta O18 curve. In here, we see that the ocean side system, hopefully you could read this. Maybe it's not really viable. Ocean side system initiation. Here we see that the ocean side system initiate in around 45,000 years ago, and it shoot down around 13,000 years ago. The yellow one, the Carlsbad system, is shut down in 10,000 years ago, and it's actually starting long before or long below 50,000 years ago. Okay, I forgot to mention that for the age control, they use the carbon-14 dating. That's why the limit of the age dating is around 39,000 to 45,000 years from now. And last but not least, La Jolla is happen to active in around, yeah, maybe around more than 50,000. So in the past, it is shut down around 40,000 years ago, and then reactivated around 13,000 years until, and it's still active until present. The most interesting fact is, meanwhile, most of the fan system is active in low stand level periods. If we see that these yellow and red colors or orange colors is mostly active in, if we see Y axis is sea level, is most of the fan is normally active in low stand sea level. Quite the contrary, that the La Jolla fan system is actually reactivated in the maximum sea level high. This is mean that the fan construction is a rebuttal against the conventional sequence stratigraphy wisdom, where the deep sea fan are always deposit in low stand periods. In a simple way, we could see that during the OIS or oxygen isotope stage 3 and 2, there are a parasitic fan system construction in the ocean side and also Carlsbad Canyon. And the La Jolla system is actually dormant during that time, as there is actually no what we call as the catchment area adjacent to the La Jolla head of canyon. If we see here is empty, so there is no catchment area directly adjacent to the La Jolla Canyon. And La Jolla fan system is started to construct as the sediment flux from the upper catchment here are gathered and delivered by southwestward long coast current. So this is actually the I forgot to mention, this is a low stand shoreline. This is the high stand shoreline. And this is land, this is ocean, and this is the deep sea fan system. So the La Jolla fan system actually started as the sediment flux from the upper catchment gathered and delivered by south-southwestward long coast current via a flooded self-corridor into the La Jolla Hedge Canyon, and it constructs the large coalescence fan system in the basin floor, this yellow color here. So again, in the high stand sea level, the flooded narrow selvar area somehow act as the sediment conveyor belts. So again, this is ocean and this is the land, and this is the narrow selvar area. And people usually call it as the oceanside littoral cell. This is bring all the sediment load into the large La Jolla Canyon, assumably like a conveyor belt. And to improve the analysis and to gain the estimate material balance of the source to sink models, the beryllium-10 proxy is incorporated. So the beryllium-10 is a radioactive proxy for the denudational rate. This radioisotope is accumulates in soils and decay in a half-life in 1.3 million years. It is believed as the product of the cosmic ray bombardment of oxygen in quartz minerals. And the result is no. We knew that the denudational rates upstream in every catchment area, and hopefully we could be able to validate them with the depositional rate downstream calculated by the delta O18. So in this case, sample in Santa Margarita Basin catchment area is around 0.12 millimeters per year denudational rates. In San Juan Basin is around 0.24 millimeters per year. And in San Dieguito Basin, it's around 0.07 millimeters per year. And it will be compared with the oxygen isotope stage in marine area. So by knowing the volumetric and sedimentation rate, we could do the balanced paleodepositional reconstruction as the ultimate high-res stratigraphic results. Now we move to the second example of the delta O18 proxy utilization in Gulf of Papua. So firstly, the Gulf of Papua is a unique environment and probably one of the best natural laboratory to compare the contrast between wide and gentle slope passive margin in Papua mainland versus the steppe and narrow self-active margin in the Papuan Peninsula. This basin actually began receiving the terrigenous sediment in the proximal area as early as Eocene, or around 55 to 33.9 million years ago. And assumed to have the maximum or the peak depositional rates through the entire basin during the Pliocene and Holocene, which is around 5 million years ago, when the uplift in the orogenic belt intensified as the result of the collision between the South Pacific plate and Australian plate. The uplift along the collision margin produced greater than 4,000 meters relief of the Papuan orogen. We knew some of the highest mountain in the equator is around here. In Indonesia, we have Jaya Wijaya or Kartens Pyramid Peak, which is around 4,800 meters. So this uplifting relates to the rapid sedimentation downstream, for sure. This is behind the reason that why it is has the really enormous sediment flux of around 220 million metric tons per year from a very small catchment area, which is around only 160,000 square kilometers. This area is highly affected by the strong coastal current, known as the, hopefully is viable, GPC. GPCs mean the Gulf of Papua current. And then we have SEC. SEC is a South Equatorial Currents. And we have also here East EAC. So in the southern area, there is a EAC. It's stand for East Australian Current. And NGCC. So NGCC is a abbreviation from the New Guinea coastal current. So these current models or surface current model will later incorporate to the sediment conduits and dispersal or routings model. In this research, we acquire a multi-beam bathymetry. We also acquire a high-frequency seismic data, which is around 3.5 kilohertz bottom profiling. We also take some jumbo piston cores during the 2 research cruise leg, which is a Melville cruise and a Marion Dufresne cruise. The control on the sediment sourcing are using the detailed geological map with some assumption as the sediment delivery hypothesis control, such as a major input for both trough. Okay, sorry, I forgot to mention, we have 2 trough here, actually. It's a Pandora trough adjacent to the Papuan mainland and Moresby trough adjacent to the Papuan Peninsula. So major input for both trough is actually from Papuan orogen. And there is a prolonged transport to Pandora trough compared to the Moresby trough, as the conduits or the distance of the sedimentation is longer than the one in the Papuan Peninsula. There is more erosional cycle observed in Moresby trough, and there is volcanogenic input during the 22,000 to 17,000 before present. And there is a majority of mafic input from the Papuan Peninsula, as it is a lot of metamorphic belt here, but it also mostly associated with the volcanic rock. And yeah, metamorphic input is significant in Moresby trough. This is the jumbo piston core that we acquire. And the stable isotope sampling was done in the core number MV27. That is assumed as the area that deposited in the most downstream area, and assume as the least disturbed area from the catastrophic mass transport deposit or gravity flow. And if we see the red annotation here, mostly are taken by the C14 radioisotope dating. This sediment accumulation rate, or SAR, also calculated through the entire core section based on the oxygen isotope stage or marine isotope stage. So oxygen isotope stage and marine isotope stage is actually the same things. It's only a different in terminology. Some of the researcher using MIS and some of the researcher using OIS. Basically, this analysis enable us to see the evolution of sediment accumulation rate for each oxygen isotope stage. Like an example in the upper left-hand side is MIS or OIS3, MIS2, and MIS1. And the other alternative methods also used to see the finer grain sediment. So we already see the finer grain sediment. In this case, the hemipelagic sediment dispersal evolution. And in this example, we use the clay minerals provenance analysis. This is the example of the detailed down core clay mineral provenance analysis, where the hemipelagic mud are evaluated based on their clay composition of, I think there is 4 classification of clay here, which are spectite, illite, kaolinite, and chloride. And compared to the hypopycnal sediment produced by the river mouth stream sediment. For the coarser grain sediment, mostly taken from the sediment gravity flow or turbidite sand, we are also analyzed using scanning electron microscope or SEM and classify them using MLA or mineral liberation analysis, which is basically contain a complete density spectral library for each minerals. This method is novel and powerful as it allows us to perform around 20 to 30,000 particles count and around 50 to 80,000 grain counts. So this is an example of what we define as a grain. A grain is one single fragment like this, in example of in this picture. And this whole chunk of block is called as a single grain. And if we see a variation of color inside it, this is the particle count. So again, we can count around 20,000 grain like this, 20 to 30,000 grain like this, and around 50 to 80,000 grain, 50 to 80,000, particle. Oh, sorry, we can perform 20 to 30,000 particle count and 50 to 80,000 grain count. So if we compare with the conventional or a manual provenance analysis, maybe the maximum we can do is around 500 grains point count using like a Gazi and Dickinson. So this method actually really promising. And for the information in Pertamina Research and Technology Center, we actually have this sort of equipment. And to classify the mineral group, we use a cluster analysis by using a non-metric multi-dimensional scaling, which is a result in a 12 discrete class. So in here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 until 12 class of specific minerals. And these class are used to create an in-frame sand-to-sand correlation constrained by the H models that previously built using the delta 018. And to remind you that the reference well for delta 018 is this well. So by incorporate the multi-proxy data such as the delta 018 and also the provenance control of the fine-grained minerals and sand turbidite, added with the oceanic current models and provenance data, we could reconstruct the detailed source-to-sink narrative in Pleistocene Gulf of Papua by slicing the previous regional section. So here we could see that the oldest H frame is in the top left of the slide, which is around mid mist or marine isotope stage 3. And we can follow this blue arrow to see the sequential process of the fan system depositional. And also we provide the supplemental oxygen isotope stage excursion curve in the bottom side, where if we move to the right hand side, it's older, and if we move to the left hand side, it's younger. In here, we could see the very complex network of the fan depositional system, which is far more complex than the one in the California borderland. So this scale of detail is hard to define if we only use a conventional stratigraphy methodology, such as using a conventional correlation by the biostratigraphy. We could observe that some of the isolated fan system is constructed during the early low stand. So here. And this is coalescent downstream in the Moresby Trough and transform into a direct, sorry, it's, okay, this is Moresby Trough. So all the fan system is flowing downstream, and it is transformed from the direct point source. So this is a direct point source actually, into a mixed transfer stream system in the quite big Moresby Canyon. And during the high sea level periods, so if we see this shaded color is actually represent the sea level. So like here, this is a high sea level. And with the time, the sea level is dropped from here to here, and it's reached the maximum low in the D, because D is around let mist 2, or around like 21 to 15,000 years ago. We can see here that during the high sea level period, most of the parasitic fan system are shut down, and it's only leave one head of canyon and Moresby Trough to become a single conduit that creates a large high stand fan system, just like the one what we see in the California borderland. So it's around here. Okay. Now we move to the other delta isotope, and now we say goodbye to the delta oxygen 18. We leave the delta oxygen 18, and we will briefly review the second proxy, which is delta carbon 13. So same like the oxygen, there are 3 carbon isotopes in delta carbon isotope. The difference is one of this is actually radioisotope. Maybe all of you could guess it is a carbon 14 radioisotope. So we will gonna use only carbon 13, delta carbon 13, and delta carbon 12 for the ratio. So with the assumption that the nutrient availability is constant and has very little change, and carbon 13 is lower in dissolved organic carbon and higher in dissolved inorganic carbon. So dissolved organic carbon actually comes from terrestrial, comes from the anthropogenic effect, or maybe from the plant remains that deposited into the ocean water. And the other one is, so it's DOC. The other one is DIC. DIC is a dissolved inorganic carbon. It is actually originated from the self-carbonate productivity. So this is independent from the terrestrial factors. So the carbon 13 is lower in DOC, in dissolved organic carbon, and it's higher in DIC, in dissolved inorganic carbon. And in the other way around, the carbon 12 is lower in DIC, or is lower in dissolved inorganic carbon, and higher in DOC, or DOC dissolved organic carbon. This means that everything that relates to the carbonate productivity in the self area and its burial process, especially during the transgressive periods, because as we know that carbonate is have active productivity in transgressive periods, it would lead to a positive delta carbon 13. And conversely, during the sea level low stand, the reduce of the carbonate productivity, the potential oxidation of the self-fault sediment, and the additional influx of the land materials, organic matters from the land, will induce a negative delta carbon 13 excursion. This is the global Phanerozoic delta carbon 13 trend with around 5 million years running average that's showing a general increase during the Paleozoic. And so Paleozoic is here from Cambrian to the Permian, so the border Permian and Triassic. We can see the increasing trend here, and oscillation trend during the Mesozoic to the Quaternary periods. In the right-hand side, we could see the curve, which is actually a plot of all measurement in either carbon 13 and oxygen 18 around in the sea around the world. So we can see that the trend from the benthic foraminiferal carbon and oxygen isotope values. So the carbon curve is in the upper side and the oxygen curve is in the lower side. And actually the dot is very small, but there is a color in the dot. This is represent the individual ocean basins such as Pacific in black, North Atlantic in red, South Atlantic in brown. I don't think even me, I cannot see the brown colors here. And the rest is highlighted to southern oceans in blue colors. The most interesting things is we could see the inverse relation between those two excursion curve. So if the carbon-13 tend to be increased, the delta oxygen-18 will decrease and vice versa. This is mean that both of the curve actually have a really strong correlation. So the delta oxygen-18 actually shows the trough in delta oxygen-18 shows the deglaciation periods where the oxygen-18 is increased. That's mean the melting seawater. And in the same time, in delta carbon-13, the dig is increased. So the delta C13 is increased. Those mean the the curve confirm as the as high sea level or a transgressive periods. I just have one actually example of the utilization of the carbon-13 direct measurement in outcrop. Most of the other samples is done in the seawater. So I think I prefer to show you the things that a bit different with the previous oxygen isotope methods. Oh, sorry, I forgot to explain about the area. So the area is in the border between Spain and France, which is called as the Pyrenees area. So this area is actually subtropic, so it's covered by snow in the winters, and the snow is totally gone if we go there in summer. So originally the area is included in the Ainsa-Jaka or AGT, Ainsa-Jaka axial trough. So this trough is actually constructed as a result of the Iberian and Eurasian plates convergence. The highland in Pyrenean relief is believed as the main source of the sediment to fluvial and shallow marine system in the foreland. So this is a foreland here, which is furthermore fit the Ainsa-Jaka trough as a deep marine depositional system. So most of the outcrop we found here actually a deep marine turbidite, which is believed to be deposited since Eocene or around 55 million years ago, following the foreland thrusting in Upper Cretaceous. So the distal part of the Ainsa Basin succession is consisting of several medium to coarse sediment gravity flow, and this is embedded inside the thick interval of marly limestone and thin-bedded sandstone turbidite. The sediment gravity flow formations are mainly in place above the unconformities that are correlated to the coarse grain, shallow marine, and fluvial units in the upstream area, which is around here. Whereas the Marley siltstone members link to fine grain intervals and calcareous package marking the transgressive event in the what we call as the distal area. Okay, this is actually the outcrops that we use as the examples. This is a part of the lower part of deep water outcrop stratigraphy records of AGT or ENSA Jakarta Trough in the border between Paleocene and Eocene. And below, the outcrop is in a unit 4 and unit 5, which is contained of actually several deep water carbonate units. In the right-hand diagrams, it shows that the stratigraphic record and around maybe more than tens or maybe more than 60 samples of carbon, stable carbon 13 isotopes data that taken directly from the outcrops. And we also compare it with the red curve here is actually a TOC or total organic carbon, and HI per OI is it's a hydrogen index per oxygen index. I will explain this one later. And we will compare this with the existing sea level division, which is already constructed in 2005. Okay, and if you see this red triangle here, this is actually biostratigraphy anchors. So we have absolute biostratigraphy samples here also. And in the Eocene ENSA Jakarta Trough, the bulk sediment of samples for the delta C13, it shows a good degree of correlation with the Miller's eostatic curve. So there is some deviation of the stable isotope data. It's probably just come from several factors such as diagenesis, calcifying organism, or maybe just a mineralogical variation in the sediment. So if you see here, the gray color curve here is actually a Miller sea level models, which is established in 2005. And this is the red colors here. It's actually derived from this curve here. This is the delta carbon 13 excursion. We can see that most of it is have a really good correlation. If I'm not wrong, the correlation is around 0.81. So it's quite good for the field data. So the HI per OI actually indicate the marine and lacustrine algae, plankton, or in situ bacterial reworking. So it shows a correlation to a maximum flooding surface in some place, or a sea level high stand. So if we see some of it which is reached the peak here, it's probably could be defined as the maximum flooding surface or sea level high stand. And the strange name here, it's actually the I forgot what is the name of the language. It's a Basque language terminology. Banaston, Gerb, Aro, and Fosado. It's actually an isolated sediment gravity flow, which is active during the sea level low stand, correlating with the a minus or decreasing of the delta C13 excursion curve. So if we see in Gerbit 2, it's correlate with this. Gerber 1 is probably a bit deviated here. We see also Fosado. There is a bit a trough of the delta C13 here. Whereas the high stand sequence, so I think I marked the high stand sequence here with the really thick green colors line, is associated with the depositional of a distal slope hemipelagic sedimentation. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 high stand sequence actually. It's all lithologically dominated by the distal slope hemipelagic sedimentation such as a white colors sediment here. And again, the stars is actually same with the triangle here. The stars is an anchor, a biostratigraphy anchor used to construct the frameworks for the regional stratigraphy in this area. Okay, maybe that's all for the examples. 18, and now we discuss about the delta C13. And after reviewing some of those new methods, this is a bit assumed table of advantage and the disadvantage or complication of this stable isotope proxy utilization for the high resolution stratigraphic marker tools. So firstly, in delta OA, which are forms are common in deep sea sediments, so it's really easy actually to collect the data. We already have the large stack of data sets. I think the last and the largest stack of data sets is come from the LR04, or it's actually from one university, but I forgot the name. LR is stand for E and RIMO. It's the researcher name that collecting the data. And again, this is abundant and could be measured on any materials. So you don't need a fossil if you don't have a fossil, because it could be measured in seawater, ice core, phosphate, diatoms, mollusk, speleothem, and everything else that have the or contains the oxygen on it. But we cannot avoid some of the complication, such as a multiple control factor, such as paleotemperature, ice volume, and so on. Also salinity effect, and also biological fractionation. So let's say the measurement in different biological specimen will draw a different patterns. And also it is really, sometimes it is quite sensitive to diagenetic alteration and carbonate. So for delta C13, the advantage is it is not sensitive to alteration and diagenetic, so it could be complementary each other. In delta O18, it is really sensitive, but in delta C13 is not sensitive. It is actually easily measured, even it's more easy to measure than the delta O18, and usually could be measured as a combo with delta O18. And this is also showing a quite global carbon cycle. Sorry, this is a typo. Productivity indicator, actually. So it is a good data for the productivity indicator. And with a few complications, such as a multiple source variation, same like the delta oxygen 18, and also the vital effects. The vital effects mean that sometimes in some stage or in some periods, the sea level is lack of the nutrients, or maybe lack of the, so the lack of the nutrients could be mean the lack of the productivity, and this will influence the data variation. Okay, lastly, to wrap up the presentation, now we arrive in some point of conclusion. Sorry again to spoil this beautiful Saturday with this very long and boring sentence of conclusion. So I just gonna read it one by one. The stable carbon and oxygen isotopic age models provide a sensitive proxy for the global sea level fluctuation. This methodology is placed into a spatio-temporal context by adding the geometric controls, in example aided by high-res seismic, phases models or provenance analysis, are proven to and adequate to decipher a high-resolution sequence stratigraphy at periodicities of 10 to 100,000 years. Actually, this is in academic. We haven't tried it yet in the industrial scale. However, it is challenging to distinguish whether the process is purely derived from glacioclasticity or rather a couple between a climatic eustasic origin. Thus, all excursion in isotopic events should generally assume as strongly correlated to eustasy, and possibly it is a kind of interplay with the climatic control and sediment supply. The carbon stable isotope methods are relatively independent and less susceptible from the diagenesis effect. But there is evidence that the oxygen isotope could be affected or sensitive and might be subject to such a secondary transformation due to the precipitation of, an example, autogenic calcite, anaerobic reoxidation, or autogenic sulfides. Therefore, the analysis of oxygen a stable isotope should be free from the above factor and accompanied with other proxies such as chemostratigraphy and chemical index of alteration, or CIA. It's not a central intelligence agency. It's a chemical index of alteration. The application of carbon isotope analysis has a potential complication such as multiple source variation, and it is also strongly affected, like what I told before, is by the nutrient effect. So the nutrient condition in the seawater would really affect the calculation or a measurement of delta carbon 13. Both methodology have proposed a relationships between eustasis chains and a stable isotopic excursion, primarily based on the event occur in the deep sea pelagic section, which is generally quite distant away from the heterogeneous material influx from the continental margin. Thus, the term of autocyclicity in this event, it has a poor correlation with the thick silicic sequence of the terrestrial origin. So if we want to take a sample of this, it is recommended to do it in the deep water or in the maybe the what we call as the correlation conformity. So if anybody want to make a measurement in deltaic facies, it is recommended to bring it to the correlable conformation of those delta to the deep sea direction. The utilization of this proxy should therefore be interpreted with care. The last point is the acquisition of the new stable isotope data will represent an independent continuous sea level proxy. The sample interval between certain stratigraphic surface provides a more robust means to assess the correlation between the sequence stratigraphy and possibly driving signals rather than a widely used conventional approach of matching sequence stratigraphy boundaries with a global charts. So in this method, actually the sky is the limit. We can do maybe 1 meters of the space interval in core, or if you want to be more details, we can do it in 50 centimeters, or even to the more detailed scale of 10 or even 5 centimeters for each samples, depend to the available budget that we have. Okay, I think that all that I can address for today's presentation. So thank you for your kind attention, and please do not hesitate to throw on some question. Oh, sorry, this is a typo. Actually, our office is already moved to the Sapodal building, but I think I used the old slide. So okay, so I think that's all. Have a nice day. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'll bring this to the moderator, Pak Ricky.
Thank you, Pak Erlangga, for your interesting presentation. Yeah, we already have some people want to have a question to you. First is from Pak Pongga. Yeah, Pak Pongga, you can turn on your audio to ask Pak Erlangga directly.
Okay, Pak Pongga.
Okay, so I actually already wrote my questions in the chat, but let me reiterate it. So my question is, how multi-proxy approach that you have presented like benefits the hydrocarbon exploration? For example, if you compare to the monoproxy approach. Basically, that's my question.
Okay, so the question is how multi-proxy approach benefit hydrocarbon exploration? For example, as compared to monoproxy. Okay, actually the difference between multi-proxy and monoproxy is in the improved methodology. So we knew that the eostasis signal could be read or we could see the aerostatic signals or signature in the in example in this presentation is isotopic data. But we try to improve that methodology by adding some other supplemental data, such as an example, carbon-14 radioisotope, or maybe a beryllium-10 radioisotope, or the CIA, or chemical index of alteration, to make it more reliable, actually. And as the question for the benefits for the hydrocarbon exploration, actually, we have do the experimental scale, because this is a very early or initial research scale. This method actually already used and generally used by the marine geologists, but I think I never saw this method using by the industry. But if we can define a more detailed stratigraphic correlation, in examples, the stratigraphic correlation into the reservoir scale, it will be benefit us to do a more robust or a more detailed correlation. In example, in the a correlation between the channels. This is always becoming a big problems because sometimes we really hard to combine or to correlate like a sand-to-sand correlation in the channelized fascias, such as in the deltaic or in the deep marine turbidite, using the really conventional methods of biostratigraphy. So hopefully, by using this method, we can we can correlate them in the more detail.
Okay, we can move to the next question from Mas Eko Nur. You can on your audio.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunities, Mr. Erlangga and Mas Riki. Okay. I'm sorry before. Which one from your experiences the new maybe the new discoveries could be changed than all the discoveries before from your data, sir?
Okay, if I'm not wrong, your question is in which proxy examples that have already resulted in a new discovery. Is it right? Eko?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Actually, unfortunately, there is no discovery yet because this method is never been used before in the industry. The things that what I presenting here, actually, it's still in the research stage. But I think in the future, it is promising to apply or to implement these methods in the industrial scale. And hopefully we expect a new discovery then. So the answer is there is not yet a discovery from this methodology.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erlangga. Thank you.
Okay, Pak Eko Nur, thank you for the question. Next, we have Pak Vicky Amir. Yeah, Pak Vicky, you can turn on your audio, please.
Thanks, Ricky.
Okay, really clear.
My question is actually on the chat box already. So
okay.
I think you mentioned about the Pertamina UTC has the equipment, but I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think to do those kind of oxygen isotopic, whether delta 18 or probably delta 13. But just want to make sure. I think some of the participants in here, it's probably some student would it be possible to use by some of the university students for the geological mapping project? I think they're not try targeting really deep interval, probably in much more detail analysis on the reservoir characterization, on also the stratigraphic correlation, something like that. And what sort of cost that we're talking about in here on that analysis? I mean, if that is possible, I think that's my question. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. That's a quite good question, Vicky. Can I know what is your affiliation? Are you come from industry or academic?
Industry, working for ConocoPhillips.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think we meet before in IBA. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So yeah, actually, the one that I mentioned before is the equipment not for the isotopic. I don't think Indonesia has already the mass spectrometry for the oxygen isotope or carbon isotope. Most of the samples here should be sent off to the, maybe the nearest lab is in the Australia. But in UTC, we are not in UTC actually, we are in the Research and Technology Centers, or URT, Upstream Research and Technology Centers. The things that we have in our lab is actually the SEM, or the scan electron microscopy. So, and yes, I think in some way it could be used for the a student or maybe university research. And as I told before that actually in RTC, we try to find some of the ideation, especially from the academic, from the university, some fresh or a wild research idea that could be incorporated in our project. And it is actually held around maybe November or December in the end of the years. And if the project is accepted, then in some case they could start the research project the years after. So I think, yeah, the answer is yes. There is a big possibility that we can use the data for that research. Thank you, Pak Vicky.
I think we can end this question session, yeah. Pak Erlangga, thank you very much on behalf of FOSI for your interesting presentations. I will send you the certificate also, and then we will post it later to YouTube channel, so anyone who cannot attend this live meeting can join via YouTube. I think that's from me. And then we have Melinda. Melinda, do you have something to say?
Okay, thank you, Mas. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Pak Erlangga, I cannot join your meeting since the beginning. I have another meeting this one. Sorry, very sorry for this one. Maybe for me, thanks a lot for your time. This is your second sharing session during COVID-19 for FOSI. So we're still waiting another research from you to be shared to participants and FOSI as well. To all participants, and thank you very much for your time, for joining this session, spending your weekend for this FOSI talk, and see you again. We will have a fun Gorsel by the end of this month, and then we will have another talk in early July from Peter Lan and Bob Burley. So see you again in another FOSI talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much all. Thank you very much, Pak Erlangga, for
Thank you
your
very much.
excellent presentation. Yeah.
Thank you.